True to the name of this podcast, I'm going to start with a 2x2. Suppose you woke up today and you decided to start a startup and you're looking for an opportunity to disrupt an existing player. You'll draw a 2x2 something like this. On the x-axis, you'd put companies based on market size. So that means companies with really small markets on the left side and companies with really large markets on the right side. And you'd basically put companies from on the y-axis in terms of obvious companies versus unobvious companies. And I'll explain what I mean by that, which means that certain companies are very obvious. Like even if they didn't exist in certain markets, you would expect that they naturally would be there. We know that, say, commerce is such a large market and it's obvious there's going to be one horizontal player there who's going to be the center of commerce. So a company like, say, a Flipkart would be a large company in a large market and an obvious company. You can, on the other hand, look at a company like, say, Cred, which is essentially a company that is somewhat unobvious in a smaller market. Paying for credit card bills and having a company that just does that seems like a very unobvious proposition, and you have Cred somewhere in there. You also have examples of many companies that are in small markets and obvious, but those are the boring ones. But today we're going to talk about the most interesting one. The most interesting one and the rarest of the rare breeds are the companies that are operating in large markets but are completely unobvious and the anomalies. The number one company and the company we're going to talk about today is Google Pay. Today's 2x2 episode is about the anomaly of Google Pay. It's India's second largest UPI app with a market share of 38% and does over 500 crore transactions a month. It's backed by one of the world's mightiest tech companies, and yet it is an anomaly in India. By this, we mean that it's a company that isn't supposed to be here, but yet it is. We believe that over the next few months and over the next few years, as UPI changes, as payments change, and as transactions change, Google Pay's anomaly is going to become even more stark. By this, we don't mean that it's going to necessarily disappear overnight, but all kinds of changes are coming, and it remains to be seen whether Google Pay can keep up and whether this company can stay where it is. To talk about this, we have two guests, both of whom have some incredible experience in this area. First, there's Abhishek Madan. Abhishek describes himself on his LinkedIn as, and I quote, a creative person who loves making consumer products that people enjoy using, end quote. He's currently the VP for product at Paytm, where he's been running their UPI product for nearly 2.5 years. So, Abhishek is the perfect person here to come and talk about UPI, Google Pay, and how all of these areas have changed over the years. And then we have Vasisht Ravichandran. Vasisht is very interesting because he's building something completely new. It's a startup called Pop. Here's how he describes it. He calls it a UPI and an e-commerce app all in one. You make a UPI transaction and then you earn something called Pop Coins, which you can use to buy and redeem products right there on the app. So it's almost like you are using UPI to create some new form of currency. It's been 3 months since they launched, and Pop says they're already at a 1 million monthly UPI transaction run rate. So of course we want Vasisht on this episode, which is centered almost completely around UPI. But even apart from this, Vasisht spent 8 years at Flipkart and was most recently Flipkart's director and business head of Flipkart Plus, which is of course one of India's largest e-commerce loyalty programs. So he not just started Pop, which fundamentally inverts the way we look at UPI transactions and commerce, but he also understands a thing or two about loyalty and why people stick around with products. Apart from this, I also have Rohin with me, who, like all of our guests here and me, has strong points of view on consumer products. Welcome to 2x2, a weekly premium business podcast from the Ken's newsroom at the intersection of curiosity and synthesis. We like to call it your own personal investigative brain. This is episode 7. Let's begin. We began with how Google Pay is a company that isn't supposed to be here, but it is. And this isn't a stroke of luck or a coincidence. Google Pay had its strengths back when it launched.
If you look at Google Pay historically, they've been slow with UPI features. They were not the ones that were building UPI features. Amongst the big apps, they were not the first ones. They were the chilled out ones. They were the, hey, we'll make it right. Hey, it's more important to make this mango house festival thing where you collect scratch cards and have fun, etc. They weren't very like, now UPI International has been launched. I need UPI International on my app. The other apps were doing that. But over time, especially in the last few months, I've seen them become more bullish about UPI features. I can see them trying harder. I can see them having more time on NPCI launch events. Right? You can see how hard they go on Mapper for now. If you open Google Pay, they constantly tell you, yeah, put your UPI number as Google Pay's UPI ID. And it's a full page interruption, which is very unlike Google. Every second day, they want you to link your credit card. They want you to link your credit line. So I get what you're saying, which is that, hey, this has usually been a lackadaisical, coastal attitude to life kind of, I will relax kind of company. But off late, we are seeing signs of them wanting things. So I do think they want, what is the reason? I don't know, but they do seem to desire.
There are a couple of indications of this. For example, a few days back, they were one of the first of companies in line, along with Amazon Pay, Cred, MobiKwik and PhonePe, to participate in the e-rupee initiative by the RBI. The RBI wanted to basically do e-rupee, and I know it's not exactly UPI, but it was similar. So they have been putting their foot forward and trying to talk about some of the adoption, some of the newer things which wasn't there earlier. I'll start with the beginning, since we spoke about historical aspects of UPI and Google Pay. Google Pay actually began in 2017 as this company called Tez. So it was launched around that time, just around a year after UPI was launched. And Tez was one of the stories, actually it was one of the company that actually broke the story of Google entering payments on UPI via Tez is the Ken. So it's one of our first big breaking stories that everybody else picked up. But one reason for its success and its dominance was because it moved early. Is this something that resonates with all of you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you think that has a role to play in its early days?
Absolutely, because I think PhonePe and Google Pay being the first two movers, right, did help them capitalize on the 2016 end, 2017 beginning rampage that happened, right? Like huge migration happened from cash to digital. That and added to that is the fact that Google also came with a lot of trust. While I get Rohin's point on Google versus PhonePe and someone picking PhonePe because of Google's data angle, right? But still, Google also came in with a lot of trust. Back then, 2016-17, people were hesitant to move to digital payments, also because they did not trust an app, right, where you have to link your bank account to an app, right? I think Google also came in with a lot of trust. There were other players also, who tried to come in, but Google did command a lot of trust, which also drove a lot of people in back then.
So, Praveen, I still want to go back to something that you said earlier on in intro. You said Google Pay is an anomaly, right? And I think it bears explaining why is it an anomaly, right? And the way I see it is that Google Pay is an anomaly because it is the only product which is not really a business in this hyper-competitive market, right? PhonePe, it's a product, it's a business valued at 12 billion. Paytm, product, business. Cred, it's a product, it's a business. Every pop, I'm sure you're building a business, right? You don't think of it as I'm building a product, right? If a business happens. But my point is that Google Pay, while it may be making money, it may be generating revenue, it may even be profitable. I do think it actually is profitable.
Yes,
it's a business.
There's an indication that in 2019, if you looked at numbers that were reported, Google Pay as a business entity was profitable. But I must stress it and caveat it by saying that it probably didn't account for tech costs because it's part of a larger organization.
Let's just agree that it's virtually impossible for anyone, possibly inside Google also, to figure out exactly how many people are working on Google Pay, exactly how much money are we making, where are we losing, where do the people sit, how do they communicate with each other. Let's just forget it, right? That's exactly my point. My point is that Google Pay is not a business. It does not operate in the same way, for instance, a PhonePe does.
Can you explain that a little bit more?
Who's the who's the CEO of Google Pay? What is Google Pay's objective in India? Does it want to win market share? Who said that? Have you seen someone come and say that this is our product lineup? And all the normal things that we take for granted in a business, right? I mean, we talk about Zomato, we talk about Paytm, we talk about PhonePe. Who do you associate with? The leadership. What is Google Pay's leadership in India? When did you last see it? What do we know what they want to do, right? What we do know is that Google Pay is a successful product built inside this giant organization called Google, run by Google staffers and executives, right? And their success, though linked to Google Pay, is not linked at the hip. It's not sink or swim. Everyone who works at PhonePe or Paytm knows that if they don't succeed, the company goes under, right? But for Google Pay, you can, if you do a really great job, perhaps you get promoted to a different country. Perhaps you get promoted to a different, it's a very odd, this thing, we don't realize it. And that's why I feel it's almost like, I'm a person who loves metaphors and analogies. I almost see it as like Google Pay is like this giant dolphin swimming in a sea of sharks. It's an anomaly. It's not a business.
If you look at Google, right, their two strengths are product innovation, of course, everyone knows, and their ability to harness data and use it in other ways, right? Not in your face selling loans. I don't think any of their products have that. I don't think any of their products in your face.
Sorry, give me an example of firstly, let's take these 2 points that you made. Google was known for a lot of product innovation. I'm not really sure the last few years it's at that cutting edge. But your second point was they use data in non-obvious ways to build something else. What did you mean by that?
See, they basically, Google's strongest point is the ways in which they harness data, right? They look at data, they look at, user behaviors, how they browse, what you browse, what you buy, right? All of it, right? But they do it in a very non-obvious way, right? They don't in your face cross-sell. They don't while browsing something, right? They push a product on you, right? Probably the data gets consumed by someone else, and that someone else uses, other ways, probably a meta to push a product on you, right? I've never seen a Google product which has a very in-your-face cross-sell. And I think Google Pay also follows the same. So I think principally there is, Google is just following its strengths, is how I would put it.
Abhishek, do you have a point of view on Google Pay as a product, given that your experience, etc.? Because I know Rohin is saying that, I don't see much innovation, etc. But I think you have a different point of view on.
So I'll make a brief point on what I call a trust exit scam.
What is that?
A trust exit scam. So I don't know if you guys were into the darknet, but largely how darknet markets worked was that if you had to sell in the darknet, I would take 1 Bitcoin as escrow from you. And every time someone bought something from you, I would take their money and store it in my escrow. When you fulfilled and the customer said you have fulfilled, I would release the funds to you. So darknet markets were essentially like Flipkart darknet version, were large escrow holds. And the biggest danger was when markets became popular and they had lot of sellers and lot of orders, maybe one day the escrow will run off. We'll take all the money and run off. I believe our apps do that.
And then the remaining users will have to pay up 50%.
No, they don't
to
do
make them whole. Sorry, I was making a Wazir joke.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You were right. But it was all darknet, so there's no socialization. It's just the seller and the buyer don't even know who each other are, so they can't cry on each other's shoulder also. But what happens, I believe, in apps nowadays very often, especially apps who have had great success as a consumer product but are trying to monetize as a business, they've sold you trust. They've said, we are a nice app, come use us to do these things. And then one day they'll put one checkbox and you won't see it. They'll try to sell you in your normal flow. They'll try to sell you something you don't want with a big blue button. You'll click it, you'll pay 11 rupees extra. You'll say, fine, 11 rupees extra, but that's 1 million people paying 11 rupees extra. Right? So they take your trust and then they run away with it. So I call this a trust exit scam. Google has either the moral fiber or the organizational inertia to not do trust exit scams.
I suspect it's the latter.
Absolutely.
Okay, we have spoken a lot about Google Pay, the product. It came first, it had a certain amount of organizational will, which is rare, and it relied on brand and trust, which was super important at the time. But what about the business side of things? Google Pay has 38% of the market share in UPI, but how do UPI apps like Google actually end up making money?
So let's talk about briefly how you make money off of UPI.
Okay.
There are 2 parts to UPI. There are people like us who pay and there are merchants who receive money. inside people who pay, you can either pay other people. Inside the group of people who pay, you can pay other people, which we call P2P, and you can pay merchants, which we call P2M.
Okay.
In P2P, so largely in a UPI value chain, you have the bank, which holds your money. Yeah. Either if you're the payer or the pay, you have a bank account. You have a handle, which is the PSP, right? You have an app. And sometimes if you're a merchant, you have an acquirer, right? Now, money is fundamentally distributed amongst them. And banks, being as smart as they are, they force certain actions on the apps so that they don't have to pay money to the app, right? They try to reduce.
Of what some of these actions?
You can take Google Pay. So you can open up Google Pay, go to your settings and see which handle is provided to every linked bank. If you have an ICICI linked bank, it will have an @OKICICI handle. If you have a HDFC bank, it will have an @OKHDFC bank handle. If you have some non PSP bank, so I think Google Pay has ICICI, HDFC, Axis, and SBI. So if you have an IndusInd account, it will be randomly given one of these handles. On the other hand, if you look at PhonePe, you get all handles for all banks. What Google Pay does is it joins you at the hip because that's what the banks want. So if you're paying using an ICICI account through @OKICICI, it saves ICICI money. Right? Understood. At the same time, if you are an ICICI account holder and you pay using @YBL, it costs ICICI money. So
you're saying PhonePe doesn't do this?
PhonePe doesn't.
What does PhonePe do?
PhonePe does some internal routing. So one thing I'll just address before we get to your question is that PhonePe has its fingers in every possible pie. PhonePe has an app, as we all know. The handles that are on PhonePe's app run on technology that PhonePe has helped build, right? And lastly, PhonePe is also one of the largest merchant acquirers. So we said there are 4 parties. There's a bank, there's a PSP, there's an app, there's an acquirer. Then there's the NPCI, which no one can, take over. PhonePe can't be a bank, but it is all the other 3 things. It is an app, it is an acquirer, it is a PSP. And it gets some bips of everything. Google Pay is only one of those things, right? Google Pay is only an app. They use PSPs that the bank hires as, vendors who build this technology and sit on top of them, as far as I know. Maybe things have changed since then. And Google Pay's acquiring network is very small.
See, I think on the business side, right, at the onset of, when 2017-18, when things started picking up, and I'd want Abhishek's comments also on this, right? I think companies would have started off taking one of the 2 sides, right? Basically the consumer side adoption and the merchant side adoption. Because UPI is basically 2 things, right? P2P, peer-to-peer transaction, and P2M, which is peer-to-merchant, person-to-merchant transactions,
Correct.
right?
He explained that, yeah.
The way it panned out, right, in the early years, I think I earlier mentioned how PhonePe and Google Pay are diverging in a way, right? In the way of geography and all. I think this is one way where they actually converged, right? Because at the beginning, PhonePe and Google Pay were on the consumer adoption side more than, say, a Paytm, right? Because they were giving out cashbacks, they were giving out scratch cards, right? And
that was a Google Pay innovation, if I'm not mistaken, right?
It began
with Google Pay, right?
Do you want to share the figure that you heard about Google Pay's revenue from
I
scratch
think
cards?
Unverified, of course, but Google Pay does about 50-60 crores per month just in scratch card distribution today, right?
Does meaning it spends?
No, it makes.
Oh.
It
From
makes
brands.
distribution, again, the same from brands, right?
Understood.
But the point is that I think at the beginning, both these companies, the way they looked at the business is more on customer adoption, where they wanted to just get as many customers onto P2P, right? Because, at the beginning, P2P, P2M, it looked like 50-50, and, which way we take was a question. And then these two went in this direction of P2P, right? And then they gave scratch cards, cashbacks. And I think while
What's the split
Paytm,
today between P2P and P2M?
About 30-70. 30 being P2P and 70 being P2M. A lot of P2P is P2M masquerading as P2P. Your plumber comes and takes money, he's P2M, but you're paying him through P2P.
But then I think transaction size-wise, it's the other way around.
Because a lot of times P2P
Sorry,
transfers
other
are
way
very large.
around meaning?
P2P is a
majority.
Larger
By a good
transaction.
number. I think last month was some 70% or so.
Got it.
In terms of
70% by transaction.
Fewer transactions,
value.
but higher value transactions
Yes.
on the person-to-person side.
Yes.
And more transactions, but lower value transactions on the person-to-merchant
70
side.
sounds high, but it will be, it will be
71,
outsized.
I remember, if I
Could be.
somewhere around that number. So I think that way, I think Paytm went the merchant way. They, went ahead, did all the merchant adoption, right? I think they had a lot of feet on street. They were the first to reach a lot of these 1-2 crore merchants that we see currently on the platform. So I think this approach helped both Google Pay and Phone Pay quickly capture market. I'd want your comments also on it, but whereas Paytm went the other way, and
Sure.
I think that created the disparity right from the word go.
But from a business standpoint, what's the trade-off between P2P versus P2M?
You
Let's
only-
talk from a cost standpoint. If you're talking from a cost standpoint, I would imagine that the P2M thing, like you said, Vasisht, you spoke about feet on street. It requires you to go out into the market,
Absolutely.
talk to merchants, put your QR codes in places. And I'm imagine that companies like PhonePe and Paytm had like a lot of resources that were spent there, but perhaps Google Pay didn't. Is that something that we can...
I understand Google Pay also has a sound box. I mean, this is news to me, but like I've never seen it in the real world.
So
but I understand
I have a thing about the soundbox. I found out about the soundbox. So the soundbox is actually okay. So they've been very shy with rolling it out. It's called the Sound Pod, and whenever you basically like scan it, it gives you the sound. It's very similar, but it's very, very new, and it's just very, very nascent at this point in time.
Right. Even the choice of language, pod isn't particularly a word that my Kirana wala is going to understand.
Not a
But-
mass.
Yeah.
Yeah. But sorry, but you wanted to talk about... Do you want to talk on the cost side?
Possibly, like, sorry. I mean, on this pod thing, just remind me of something that the Google Pay earlier versions of the product, etc., were built out of Singapore.
Right.
So a lot of the sensibility that you see in the app is not
Absolutely.
inherently local.
Absolutely.
Right? And so the simplicity, the design, the use of pod, etc. Now, again, you could see, is that a feature or is that a bug? Any other Indian company would be like, there's no way it'll get laughed out when it gets presented in a meeting or something, right? But perhaps it works at Google because it is a global organization
Right.
and it does it.
So there are costs to doing feet on street naturally.
Yes.
But clearly there is good reason to do it. And what
Any
are those?
customer acquisition, right? Like P2, feet on street to acquire merchants. At the end of the day, that sits under CAC, right?
Absolutely.
And
So CAC stands for customer acquisition
costs, right? You take this route, that is also CAC, and then you try to acquire customers and ask them to do P2P on your platform. That again is CAC, right? So broadly classifying 3 cost elements, right? The tech cost, people cost, and the CAC, right? Customer acquisition costs,
Okay.
right? And if you put it in the order, I think CAC would always be a major component, right? So, what do these platforms get back, right, on the CAC that they spent is the question that's always been there, right?
Does Google spend a lot on acquiring new users
Cashbacks.
via? So
Back then,
that cashbacks
cashbacks,
exists.
they used to spend quite a lot on cashbacks.
Even now, in fact, just today morning I was researching and there was a friend with who had another friend with them, and they said they were seeing a 5 to 50 rupee offer on transactions, right? So it's still running. Apparently it's come down from its heydays when Google
Rohin,
used...
think of it this way. Cashbacks, easy to do, right? But at the scale of any UPI, leave Google. Google is at a very, very high scale.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, even a 20 million transactions a month platform, right? 20 million is like 0.01% of the market, right?
Yeah.
It's unsustainable even at that
It'll
level.
burn you, yeah?
It'll burn you,
Because
right? So-
what I was told is that we are Indians, we'll just keep transferring money back and forth because it doesn't matter to just take advantage of that 5 to 50 rupee offer.
But you cannot sustain it beyond a point, right? So then, you'll have to bring the customers from somewhere else, right? Probably cashbacks will take you till the 20-25 million.
So is it then fair to say that the biggest cost for the other major UPI players are going to be tech plus acquisition costs on the P2M side, like this, with these people costs? But for Google, probably the costs are very high through cashbacks and P2P acquisition, along with
That
these...
used to be the case.
That used to be
right?
the case. Okay, at
when
least.
they started out. Now I don't see any cashbacks. I don't see them spending too much on customer acquisition, but then again, I don't have the data for it.
Got
but
it.
I don't see cashbacks at all on Google now.
I agree.
No, I mean, that's why I actually checked today
Only
morning.
scratch cards, and that is not funded.
No, on
with-
credit card, on the new instruments. See, right now, NPCI is offering... so, when I say instrument, I mean a way of paying, as a source of funds of paying. So, traditionally, you only had bank accounts as an instrument on UPI. Now, you have credit cards and you have credit lines. and the NPC has announced EMI on credit cards. They have international using your credit card. All of these have variable commercial rates, and they all make you more money. Obviously, bank account doesn't make you any money or very little money. These make you significantly more money compared to that. So Google Pay will incentivize these behaviors. So if you say 5 to 50, it's possible they say, hey, link a RuPay credit card and then I'll give you 5 to 50.
Got it.
if you
So
do
it's
5
like
transactions.
incremental usage they're incentivizing.
Yes.
For the features that will make money for you, right?
Absolutely,
Like for example, a recent a recent article I read where credit line on UPI,
Yes.
the third party applications, which is basically the UPI apps, right, would get about 8 bips
Yes.
back from the interchange fee that they charge the merchant, right? No, that's one way of making money. So
Hi, we have an exciting announcement to make. If you're a regular listener, you would know that the Ken's podcasts have hit many milestones this year. From Daybreak crossing 1 million downloads to the launch of our first ever premium podcast, 2x2. We want to keep this momentum going. And for that, we are looking for talented people to join our team. We're looking for a podcast producer to help us produce great narrative-driven shows at the intersection of journalism and business. We're also looking for an audio journalist who has covered one or more business sectors, ideally careers or education or tech and startups, for at least 2 years. If you fit the bill or if you know anybody who does, please check out the link in the show notes. And now, back to the episode.
UPI is obviously a market with a lot of players, existing players, plus new ones who are just entering the market. If you're one of these new startups and you're looking at this giant with a 38% market share, are you thinking, this is a soft second player and I can take away this market share? Is there an opportunity for a true competitor for the second place in this market?
A couple of points.
Yeah.
The first one being that obviously Google Pay's biggest enemy is Google. So we'll put that on the side.
I
let's
love
not
that
put
you
that on the side.
preface. I love that you preface that with obviously. Now let me please ask you, how is that obvious?
let's not.
I mean, who was that? The Titan, the who killed all of his sons and daughters, and in the end Zeus killed him.
All right,
The Sky Father who had the gods with Gaia, the mother. Google is pretty much that way. At some point it eats up its children. Like everything. So, for example, I started talking to my wife when she was my girlfriend. We spoke on Google Chat, which was Google Talk then. And then for
There's
many
some
years,
20 versions of Google Chat.
for
20, probably less.
Many years through our courtship, we spoke over it. In the beginning of a marriage, we used Google Chat, and one day we said, "This is too complicated. We don't nowadays notification is coming in Gmail. We can't do this anymore. Let's move to WhatsApp." And it is such a romantic thing to give up. Like years of courtship on one chat app, which we just have thrown away because Google said, "This child I want to eat today."
By the way, just this week, Google ate Chromecast.
Yeah, it ate Chromecast.
It ate Chromecast. Yeah. So I do think Google Pay is more valuable in India. It's a very strong foothold that they have in India in terms of presence, in terms of their suite of products and introduction into Google, all of that. If you look at a 17, 18-year-old today, their first few things are Chrome, Android, Google Pay, etc. So I see value over there, but I don't know when they will say enough is enough, we'll shut this. So I'm putting that aside. That
Which
day
one
Google
would they choose? Like, a founder I was speaking to said typically any product or business will have 4 modes, right? A, grow aggressively. B, grow. C, maintain. D, kill.
I think
If I were to ask you folks, which one do you think Google Pay is in?
KTLO, keep the lights on.
maintain. I would also answer.
Keep the lights on. Yeah,
Okay. I'll tell
The
you
founder
why,
I was speaking to said it might be grow because they do have they're continuing to spend money on it, and but I don't know. I mean, my sense is also maintain, but
I'll tell you why maintain, right? See, like I said earlier, right? Google's biggest strength is its product innovation, right? Adding features that will just wow you, right? Be it maps.
give me an
be it-
example of something like that from
be
the
it
last.
maps, the way they have, built
Continuous
maps over a period
innovation,
of time.
great. Okay, I mean-
Continuous innovation. Yeah, they might have flatlined over the last couple of years, but then innovation is there, right? I mean, it's one of their strengths. In case of UPI, all product feature addition gets aggressively, driven through NPCI itself, right? NPCI is actually doing a very good job in making digital payments top notch, right? You name it and they've already built it or they already have it in their pipeline, right? You take EMIs on UPI, you take credit line on UPI, you even take
International.
International is also there, and where what FamPay does. What is that called?
PPI interoperability.
Basically, no, you can
closed loop kind of thing.
basically
You
you
mean
can
a child wallet,
child wallet,
which is
right?
what they're doing with e-rupee right now, which Google Pay loves, by the way.
But NPCI already has a solution for that, right?
Correct,
So
correct.
Interesting. So Vasisht, what you're saying is normally they would tell founders and product people that what you're building, are you not afraid it might already be on Google's pipeline?
This
Google is in
NPCI.
that scene with NPCI.
Exactly.
NPCI is the
NPCI.
Solimo of fintech.
it's yes.
The Solimo.
It's brilliant.
Solimo is the Amazon private
Basics.
brand.
Amazon Basics. Solimo
Amazon
whatever.
Basics.
Please go.
And it's just amazing how NPCI is, if you look at their product pipeline, right? Contextual payments. I was reading about contextual payments, where basically you can give offers as a merchant. You can give offers to Rohin and not PGK. Right? Because
I like that you
Rohin
said
falls
that.
under a certain criteria and you don't, and it happens at when you scan. When you scan at the same McDonald's, you get a 5% off and you don't.
Interesting.
Right? See, these are
Vasisht, what you're saying then is that NPCI is essentially pushing the envelope on innovation and features, and it is far ahead of everyone else, right? And it's probably doing things. So therefore, anyone else who's operating on UPI cannot out-innovate because you're a commodity. Therefore, if you're a commodity, then you got to innovate on the business front.
And you
Which
probably-
we are saying that Google
Yeah.
chooses not to,
exactly,
right? So that's...
and hence maintain, right? In fact, I would say
So what you're really saying is that the onus of product innovation inside Google Pay has been shifted to NPCI.
Yes, in
and
this case-
that essentially allows them to take the luxury, quote unquote luxury, of playing it.
The operating realities are different.
Okay,
The
let's.
operating realities are different. As someone who's worked a lot with
Okay.
Fair.
them, generally how it works is you have Bade Papa, which is RBI.
Sure.
They will give you a broad view of things, which is, hey, we should fix this. And NPCI will come and say, hey, I think we can fix this by doing 1, 2, 3. And they come to apps and say, hey, how do we do 1, 2, 3?
So they're playing a very interesting middleman role where
The NPCI.
yeah.
Absolutely. NPCI.
Right. And
they're
which is their role.
Yeah, it is their role. They do it very well. And often the innovation comes out of these companies. For example, I've seen Google Pay pitch very strongly for certain ideas, which you see the light of day. Right? A lot of the things you're calling NPCI features actually were from one of these 3 or 4 or 5 apps.
Wait a minute,
Got
you're
it.
saying NPCI just kind of gets the credit for things
No,
which
no,
didn't
they're
No,
not
not necessarily. What he's saying is that the influence is two-way.
Right.
They're
You're
still
saying
the
it's a
direct
two-way
influence.
influence.
Actually, democratizing is the word. If you look at, I mean, I'm probably the smallest UPI app out there, right? NPCI asks me to adopt these features the same way they ask the biggies also to
Absolutely. Absolutely.
super democratic that way, and they are very clear about it. You have a full array, array of all offerings that any UPI app has. So that way, see, that democratization is good for the country because there is almost zero differentiation from an offering standpoint, right, across all UPI apps.
Correct.
Right, but for Google Pay, it takes away its ability to come up with a mind-blowing feature.
But coming back to the question, how can someone look at Google Pay? Is it soft? You're giving us reasons why.
Yeah, I was prefacing with my obvious part, and then we fell into this story.
Perfect.
Two
Go
things
on.
I will add is
Yes.
the first one is that another preface, just very quickly. I think something you said, there's this point of convergence where Zerodha is building UPI and PhonePe is building investment. Now, what is the real thing? Like, is it more difficult to build investment and then easily tack on UPI on top of that? Or is it harder to build UPI plus DAU and then easily tack on investment on top of that? We'll find out soon enough. But there is a commoditization of everything. As a rule, technology wants to make itself easy.
Yeah.
Right?
In
We
fact,
have-
our first
Everything
episode of
becomes a
2
super
by 2
app.
everything becomes no. I think that's a terrible
In fact, the
future.
first episode of 2x2 was essentially that same question, which is
absolutely.
about can Flipkart become PhonePe faster than
Right.
PhonePe becomes Flipkart. But yes, I take your
Right.
point about the
Right.
commoditization.
So
of
I think
UPI.
there are two directions. The first direction is trust. I feel that at some point in time, everybody will die a death because of 1,000 paper cuts. Right? It happened to me with Amazon recently. I bought a phone for my father-in-law. He got a broken Samsung phone inside. I bought an iPhone for my mother. She never got the phone.
Were you able to refund
Yeah, I was
or
still
return?
in midst of those, the
Yeah.
throes of getting a refund. It's been 20 days. And I will probably not buy something very expensive from Amazon very soon. in spite of Amazon being that kind of a company, being a premium company. So I feel everybody will at some point in time die that kind of a death. I think there's a great opportunity for banks because I believe people forgive banks for that. Right?
Interesting.
We are wedded to our banks in some way as a bug or a feature. And I feel the zamindars will come back.
Abhishek, do you remember on this point of, like, we'll come back to the zamindar analogy because it's very interesting. By the way, what is the zamindar analogy?
Fintech
landowner.
belongs to the banks, yeah.
Got it. So everybody else is just a sharecropper.
Yeah.
Okay.
Interesting.
Got it.
Tomorrow you shut down current account, what I'll run UPI. You shut down, don't give credit card, what we'll do credit card on UPI. At the end, bank is zamindar.
Continue. Go on.
So that is one thing. So
yeah.
one I feel is the return of the bank. In fact, if someone, I don't want to work in fintech, but I'd be more excited working for a terrorist group in a bank than an app today. Because I feel there is immense scope. I feel if you look at HDFC...
Just to be clear, you're just making a hypothetical argument.
Yeah, hypothetical. I don't want to work in a bank. If you look at
He didn't say anything about the terrorist group. He said the bank is the...
Yeah. No, but like startups are terrorism, in some way. But HDFC is doing...
Insurgents is the word.
Yeah, sure,
Okay,
insurgents.
fine, all right.
VCs are the terrorists.
Okay, continue. Go on.
So if you see HDFC is doing a good job with Pays app, I think it's a great app and I have good hopes from it. So that is one thing, which is the zamindars come back and say you have commoditized fintech and innovation, but you are not able to commoditize banking, so I will steal.
Thank you for listening to 2x2. Hi, this is Praveen Gopal Krishnan. You were listening to an edited and truncated version of 2x2. Unlike earlier free episodes, it's not the first 30 minutes of the discussion, which you must have realized by now. The full version of this episode is nearly 3 times as long, and it is available exclusively via the Ken's mobile apps to our premium subscribers or on Apple Podcasts if you want to buy it using a monthly subscription. However, we value you as a listener even if you don't want to subscribe to the Ken just yet. Please do stay a free subscriber. We'll be adding more features for you too. By the way, you can also read a newsletter version of this episode written by me on the Ken's website this Friday. You can sign up for it for free using the link in the show notes below. This episode was produced by Anushka Mukherjee, and my colleague Hari Krishna is the lead writer and researcher for 2x2. Our resident sound engineer Rajiv CN is the audio producer for this episode. I'll see you next week.